Hey guys, today's September 11th, and we're going to be going over piecewise functions. A piecewise function has a whole bunch of pieces, which means that you have like line segments dividing your graph up into pieces. So if you notice right here, you have a solid circle. When it's a solid circle, that means that it's including that point. Same with if it's a solid line, that means that it's including all of those points. Now, if it's an open circle, that means that it doesn't include that point. So let's go ahead and look at the first example that is already worked out for you. So looking at this first example, you'll notice that it has a line going out to the left, and it has an open circle and a closed circle. If I were to draw a vertical line going through this graph, it does pass the vertical line test because it can be equal to this point, but it's not equal to that point. So if I were to draw a line up and down, it technically does not hit 2 points. It only hits 1 point, and that's the point here at the bottom. Same thing over here. If I were to draw a vertical line, it hits that solid point, but it doesn't hit that open circle. So this is a function, okay? So that graph right here does represent a function. However, let's look at this graph over here. The graph below is not a function because it doesn't pass the vertical line test. So what does that mean? Well, if I draw a vertical line right here, notice that it's closed, so it hits that point, and then it's open right here. So that makes it a function right there, like that's okay. But over here, when you draw your vertical line, you'll notice that it hits a solid dot and a solid dot. Remember what we said yesterday. In order to be a function, it can only hit one solid dot at a time. So because it hits 2 dots at a time, that makes it not a function. Okay, so it's not a function for that example. Example 1, if you look below, these aren't worked out for you. So it says to identify whether the graphs are functions or not a function. So we want to figure out, does it pass the vertical line test? If I draw a vertical line, it hits once right here. So then I can keep going. And if I were to draw a vertical line, it hits right here, vertical line, 1 point. So it's only hitting 1 point at a time. If I draw a line right here, does it hit 1 point? Yes, it hits this point and it's not touching that point right there. So that is okay. And no matter where I draw a vertical line up and down, it's only hitting 1 point at a time. So we call this a function. So inside this little box right here, all we're going to type is F. You could put function, or you could put an F for function. Okay, graph 2. My goal is to figure out, is this one a function or not a function? So again, if I were to draw a vertical line right here, it hits this point, but it doesn't hit this point. So that's okay. Over here, if I draw a vertical line, a solid point, an open point, that's okay. But what happens if I draw a line down the middle? Well, it hits right here and it hits right here. Because it's a solid line, it hits 2 points at one time. So that means that this one right here is actually not a function because that middle part right there doesn't pass the vertical line test. So we're going to put NF for not a function, or you could just write out not a function. Example 3. We have to draw a vertical line and see if anywhere I draw a vertical line, does it hit more than 1 point at a time? Anywhere I drew a vertical line right here, open and closed, that passes the vertical line test. So this right here is a function. Example 4. If I were to draw a vertical line going through my graph right here, it's closed and then open, so that's okay. If I were to draw a line right here, notice that I hit 2 closed circles, so that doesn't pass the vertical line test. So that one makes it not a function. So I'm going to go ahead and put right here, NF for not a function. You'll notice that you have 2 more pages. On these 2 pages, you just have to go through and determine, are they functions or not a function? This is going to be some extra practice that you can do before we actually do our assignment for today to determine if it's a function or not a function. So what I want you to do is to pause the video and go through and see if you can answer the problems function or not a function on A through S. Okay, so go ahead and pause the video. Now that you've worked out the problems, I'm going to go ahead and go through A through S with you so you can check your work. So starting with A. A is a function, so you should have put F for function. If you were to draw a vertical line, it only hits 1 point at a time. Right here, this is okay to have a closed and an open. B, if you were to draw a vertical line, this one would pass the vertical line test, so it is a function. C, if I were to draw a vertical line on C right here, you'll notice that it hits 2 dots that are stacked in multiple places. So C is not a function. D, on D, we can draw a vertical line on the left-hand side of the graph, but this one makes it not a function because if I were to draw a vertical line right here, it has a closed circle, and it's also connected. So because of that, it makes it not a function. E, if I were to draw a vertical line going through this graph, it would hit 2 dots right here that are stacked on top of each other. So that would make that one not a function. F, if I were to draw my vertical line on F going up and down, it would only hit 1 point at a time. You'll notice that these two, a closed and an open, stacked on top of each other is okay. It's okay to have a closed and an open. It's not okay to have 2 closed circles. So that's a function. G, if I were to draw a vertical line through the graph, it would pass the vertical line test. So this is called a function. H, this one right here, if I were to draw a line going up and down, it would only hit 1 point at a time. So H is a function. Looking at I, if you were to draw a vertical line going through these open circles, that's okay. If I were to draw a vertical line through those open circles, that's okay. But what makes this graph not a function, yes, this graph is not a function for I, is if I were to draw a vertical line up and down right here, it'll hit right here and right here. Same for this side over here. If I were to draw a line up and down, it would hit 2 points. Also, a vertical line has multiple points. So because there's a whole bunch of dots stacked on top of each other, that makes I not a function. Okay, let's go to page 3. On page 3, you had the same process. You had to go through and determine, are they functions or not a function? So let's go back up to J. This one does pass the vertical line test. So J is a function. K, if I were to draw a vertical line, this right here is okay. So it is a function. L, I have 2 solid dots stacked on top of each other. That's not okay. So not a function. M, if you look at M closely, you'll notice that there's a closed and an open stacked on top of each other right there. That is okay. So this is a function, and the rest of the graph passes the vertical line test. N, if you look at N and I were to draw a vertical line, my goal is to determine, will there be 2 solid dots stacked on top of each other? So if I were to draw a line right here, sorry, that's a little crooked, but right through those dots, it has a solid point right here and then open. So that is okay. If I were to draw a line over here, I have a solid dot at the bottom, an open, that's okay as well. And again, no matter where I draw a line up and down, it's only touching 1 point of the graph at a time. So N is actually a function. O, here we have this little U, and the U is okay because anywhere I draw a line up and down, it only hits 1 point at a time, 1, 1, 1. Right here, that's okay to have an open and a closed, and then I can keep going all the way to the left. It only hits 1 point at a time, and all the way to the right. So this is what I call a function. Looking at the bottom, P, if you look, you have a closed and an open. That's okay. Next, right here, that's okay. Closed and an open, that's okay. Closed and an open, that's okay. So this one right here, P, is a function. Okay, looking at Q. Q, if you were to draw a vertical line, you'll notice right here in the middle, 2 solid dots on top of each other. That makes it not a function. R, even though I have a solid and an open stacked, that's okay. But what makes this not a function is the line that connects them. that line connecting them has a whole bunch of points on that line. So it has dots that are stacked on top of each other. So that makes this one not a function. Okay, looking at S. Your goal is to go straight across and figure out, are there only one point at a time that is touching the graph? So closed, open, that's okay. You keep going, 1 point here, closed, open, that's okay. That's okay, closed, open. And even though it goes down and back up, anywhere I draw a vertical line, it's only touching 1 point at a time or hitting 1 point of the graph, not multiple points. So this is actually a function. Okay, so today you're going to have piecewise functions, and you're also going to have functions that we did yesterday. You'll be looking at piecewise functions, graphs, tables, mapping, and ordered pairs. So you should be able to identify whether it's a function or not a function using what you learned today and what you learned yesterday. Okay, have a great day, guys.